Hello, I'm Jodie Rizet-O'Brien, part of the AWI Extension South Australia team. In this 10-minute talk, we're going to hear from Chris Scheid from More Australia about partial budgets and how you can use them as a tool to assist with proposed changes that may affect your profitability. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Jodie. I think just reflecting, farm owners and farm managers make hundreds of decisions a day. Many are doing this now and wondering, what if I make this change? And if you just sort of think about decision making for a minute, those with experience probably use gut feel quite a bit. So use their wisdom and talents and past experiences. Others might be looking at what others are doing and following them, particularly if they're leading farmers. And maybe some are looking at what they've done in the past and copying for that. But sometimes, as they say, past experiences doesn't necessarily mean that will lead to future experiences. Those three are subjective measurements of making decisions. And one way that we can use objective measurement to look at proposed changes is with a partial budget. So typically with a partial budget, we're looking at new costs and new income, and that's usually self-evident. But some of the things like lost income with a change or cost loss are less self-evident. So a partial budget is simply a tool to assess our best option. It focuses only on the partial changes. So we're not doing whole cash flow budgets. We're looking at the partial change, the marginal increase in income or costs or reduction of income and costs. We're also looking at the changes in income and expenses from the decision. So typically the analysis answers four key questions. What will be the new income or the added income as a result of making the change? What costs will be reduced or eliminated? And new or added income and reduced and eliminated costs is total income. And then on the negative side, we look at what will be the new costs or the added costs and what income will be reduced or lost. And those two become the total costs. So if our total income is greater than our total costs, then it's favourable to make a change. I really like to think about partial budgets as the old-fashioned back of the envelope, and they truly are an easy tool to use. So a back of an envelope or a sheet of paper divided into four can set you up for a partial budget. And here's my back of the envelope. On the left-hand side, I've got the benefits of the change. So the new income I add in, that's one of the benefits of the change. And I look at existing costs that are reduced or lost as a result of making the change. They become my total benefit. And on the cost side, on the right-hand side there, we've got income lost or foregone as a result of making the change. And we've got new costs as a result of making the change. And they get added to total costs. A net benefit is our total benefits minus our total costs. So let's have a look at an example. Maybe it's a bit easier to look at that way. So here's a little example. Here's a question that I posed to you. Is it better financial decision to share 12 monthly now versus 6 monthly in the future? So some of the dollar advantages of 6 monthly shearing, and note it's a dollar advantage. I'm not thinking about landscape or people changes. So it's purely the financial side. So some of the dollar advantages 6 monthly shearing could be wool quality improves. Now I'm going to work at 5%, but you use your own figures. If you're interested in looking at this little partial budget, it could be 2%, 3 or 4%, but it is generally accepted that there is an increase in wool quantity as a result of shearing 6 monthly. I'm going to look at an increase in wool yield as a result of VM reducing from shearing 6 months. And if our yield is improving and our quantity is improving, then there must be more dollars in doing it. Additionally, I'm going to assume we're going to lower costs such as one crutching. So instead of 12 monthly, we might be doing 2 crutchings. We might eliminate one of those crutchings and just do a pre-lambing crutching only. And maybe there's a little bit of cash flow to be saved from less overdraft interest because we've got a bit more spread of our cash flow from selling 2 wool clips over 6 months rather than one in 12 months. And then because we're seeing sheep more often with 6 monthly shearing, I've just made a little assumption there that because we're yarding them a bit more frequently, perhaps we've got the opportunity to condition score and refine some of our management to improve lamb weaning percentage. On the other side, on the cost side, is the disadvantages of 6 monthly shearing, which is all about costs, an extra ewe shearing, an extra mustering, an extra shed labour cost, There's wool testing because there's extra wool to be tested, and there's wool levy because there's extra wool income. There's additional wool packs because there's more wool, other consumables, and because the shearing team's turning up again, we've got accommodation and food. So with our partial budget, we're trying to weigh up the advantages, the monetary advantages of 6 monthly shearing versus the monetary disadvantage of 6 monthly shearing. So let's have a look at the structure. Here's our back of the envelope again, the partial budget, and we describe our partial change in the box above. And the benefits of the change become the new income as a result of making the change. Our existing costs reduced or lost are there as a result of making the change, and there are total benefits. And on the cost side in red, we've got income that we've lost or foregone as a result of making the change. And we've got new costs as a result of making the change. Our total benefits minus our total costs equals the net benefit. If they're positive, it's favourable. If they're negative, it's unfavourable. Here's our shearing 6 months versus 12 monthly. So that description is it better financial decision to shear 12 monthly now versus 6 monthly in the future? So here's my new income. I've got 2 6 monthly wool clips with 5% extra wool. I've got better quality of wool. Maybe there's less tender, lower VM, better yield. And maybe there's a 5% increase in lambs weaned as a result of better observation and more supervision because we're seeing sheep more often. There's costs that we lose. So we lost a crutching, and maybe there's a little bit of overdraft interest as a result of better spread of cash flow. All of those become our total benefits. And on the cost side, we lose a 12-month wool clip because we've gained 2 6 monthly wool clips, and we gain the new costs of an extra shearing, extra labour for mustering, sheds, wool brokerage, wool levy, wool packs, and extra shearing team costs. Again, total benefits minus total costs is our net benefit. Let's plug the numbers in now. Sorry, just before I do that, let me just show you just the 100 merino ewe flock. So I just want to simply point out not everything here, but there's deaths at 2% up the top. We've got used wool there at 19 micron. I'm using a 19 micron wool indicator price of about $18 a kilo clean. So that's a 50% off price, 65% yield. Hoggets are 17 micron, and it's a $19 per kilo. Again, a 17 micron wool indicator price, 67% yield. And down the bottom, I'm starting with 1,000 ewes, 200 hoggets, and that's our structure of our wool flock that we'll look at in terms of shearing twice versus annually. Here's our wool production from shearing annually. 980 ewes, less our deaths at 6.5 kilos a head greasy for a larger frame South Australian merino. Gives us total kilos of wool, 63.70. There's my greasy price, $11.70, and the sweep the board price. So 90% of the micron wool indicator takes into account bellies, pieces, etc. So we can see there from our 12-month shearing of 980 ewes, we're grossing $67,000, $67,076, and our total from that 1,000 ewe flock is $107,000. If I assume that we've got 5% increase in kilos greasy, our ewes are cutting 6.83 and our ewe hoggets 5.25, and if I assume that there's a 5% increase in wool prices increase respectively, and now our bottom line becomes $115,000 there. So we've made about $8,000, but what about the costs? So back to our setup again, our template. So now I've got new income in blue on the left-hand side. I've got, as a result of increased quality and quantity, I've got $115,000 for my 6 monthly wool clip, 2 6 monthly wool clips. 5% extra lambs at 50 lambs at $150 a head. Pick your own numbers, $7,500. We reduce a crutch. So reduce crutching, eliminate 1 crutching for ewes and hoggets at about $2,000. A little bit of overdraft interest. Total benefits from the change, $125,040. Total costs of the change in red, we lose the 12-month clip, $107,428, but we gain new costs of a new ewe and hogget shearing, $5,362, days extra labour mustering, 2 days shed hands, some extra brokerage and wool levy, some extra wool packs, and shearing shed team costs for a total of $114,894. And our net benefit is about $10,000, $10,146. So on the surface only, that makes economic sense with those assumptions, those numbers, and purely looking at the money side, that makes a sensible decision to move to six monthly shearing as opposed to 12 monthly shearing. So there's many more uses we can use for partial budgets than just 12 monthly versus 2 lots of 6 monthly shearing. So EID is new. We can look at adopting new technology, particularly for individual animal performance. So what's the new income versus the costs as a result of individual animal performance? That's a partial budget. Changes to enterprises. So we may be growing out our ewe lambs to hoggets and breeding from them versus breeding from ewe lambs. That's a partial budget. We may be all merino in our ewe flock versus changing to our oldest age group, mating to a British bred ram for a first cross. That's a partial budget. Hiring casuals versus permanent workers is a partial budget. Using contractors instead of machinery ownership. For example, pasture renovation. Do I do my own spraying with my own equipment, or do I use a contractor? That's an example of a partial budget. Modifying production practices. So standard sheep classing versus using fleece testing and other measurements. That's a partial budget. And capital improvements. For example, here, existing sheep yards versus covered sheep yards, and that's a partial budget. So there are many more uses that we can use our back of the envelope to do a partial budget. So finally, in summary, partial budgets are a tool that assesses the financial impacts only on making alternate decisions. It doesn't consider non-dollar impacts such as effects on resources or people or our enterprise or livestock. It's an opportunity to use objective decision making so that we might fine-tune and hone and start developing our gut feel and our subjective decision making. Partial budgets objectively assess the benefits of the change, so the new costs and the cost lost, and all of the costs of the change being the income lost and the new costs. They're the original and best back of the envelope tool, and there's many more uses that we can have for partial budgets.
Chris, thank you for sharing your experience and professional knowledge on partial budgets and how it can be used in our business. The 10-minute talk was made possible by funding from Australian Wool Innovation, the South Australian Sheep Industry Fund, and the Department of Primary Industries and Regions.